Alright, I've been meaning to make a couple of these just like shorter build diary type videos, so I thought I'd show off the character that I made in the recent RotA Phrecia event. This character has about a week of playtime, and that's about all it's going to get, unfortunately. But this is a Puppeteer, one of the alternate Templar ascendancies, sort of themed around minion stuff. And the character is basically just Infernal Legion. So we're using AG as sort of the delivery device for the Infernal Legion. Juicing up the AG with, fire dot multi stuff, putting explodes on him, scaling his AoE. And then basically you end up with like a relatively fast, relatively tanky character that clears sort of like RF, but with more damage and better explode coverage. Let me just pop a random map open real quick. The one drawback of this build is what you'll see in a second, is it has a little bit of setup time when you first get into the map. That's basically because of the way that I've chosen to build it with the Puppeteer Ascendancy. So you can see when I first open the map, I need to get animate weapons up. But once you have those down, they last for a real long time. So it's just pretty much the initial map setup that's a little bit frustrating. But yeah, when you get into the map, you can't really see what's going on. I have Spectres, I have the AG himself, who doesn't make a lot of like visual effects with his main clearing skill. But I mean, you can see that it pretty much kills everything with the explodes or with the Infernal Legion itself. And all I do is kind of run along, and every now and then I shoot some EK and summon animate weapons. I'll explain why that is in a second. And here's the single target. Not terrible. Not great. But it kills things. So yeah, honestly, I haven't been mapping with this too much. Pretty much just topping up Sulfite, and I've been delving, actually. The advantage of that is, since the changes made in Mirage, all of your minions sort of transport with you when you enter a new delve node. So you get your animate weapons up once at the start, and then you can pretty much just keep delving and just resummoning them like once every 66 seconds or so, basically. Or yeah. And I'm not going to bother full clearing this, but you kind of see how the build plays. So why Puppeteer? Well, there's only pretty much two nodes that we really care about. One of them is marionettes, but it's probably not for the reasons that you would initially think. And then the other one is enervating presence. This nearby reservation is kind of like reverse cull, cull that starts from the top. So as soon as enemies are near you, they lose basically the top 20% of their HP, which is sort of like a global 25% more damage multiplier. And over here, I just take extra curse and curse transfer. So what is this marionette's doing for us? There's a lot of stat lines. I'm going to pull up a meme I made. As soon as it loads, give me a second. All right, professional broadcaster here. So yeah, there's all these lines on there, right? Weapons you animate, create an additional copy, blah, 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 splash damage, whatever, defenses, whatever. All we really care about, and the reason that we're playing this, is for this line. So AG deals 25% ink damage per animate weapon. So what's interesting about that is each variant of animate weapon has its own count, or rather, you can use multiple variants, and each of them contribute to that number. So you can see on my bar here, I have base animate weapon, and I have animate weapon of ranged arms, and then I also actually have vol animate weapon. So these are linked to Greater Unleash, just for some quality of life, and Congregation, which increases the maximum number that you can have up. So currently, with both of these, I can get about 27 animate weapons down, I think, is my current number. Yeah, and as you can see, with Unleash, they go off, each cast goes off 5 times, and because of the Ascendancy, each weapon animated creates an additional copy. So basically, if I'm waiting for max Unleash stacks, pressing the button once spawns 10 of them. So even though I have, 54 that I need to get up to do my optimal damage, that's only like, 6 button presses, basically. So not the end of the world, and once you have them up, they do last for quite a while and don't die that easily. So all in all, I mean, it is a little bit of a pain in the ass in terms of the playstyle, but the upside is this is global ink damage for your AG, right? It's not just his attacks. Like I said, you pretty much just ignore all of the other stat lines on this, except for the additional copy, right? So your animate weapons are purely cosmetic, right? They outside of the buff that they give to your AG, you don't really care about them at all. I do have one small bit of utility, so they're applying combustion. I think this should be working as long as they have some flat fire damage, but I know there's been some bugs with combustion in the past, so I don't know. And let me just briefly explain what Infernal Legion does, because I know it's not very commonly used. It's basically kind of like shitty minion-based RF. So it burns enemies near the minion in a radius. It doesn't actually tell you what the base radius is, but it gains radius with the level of the support gem. And then in that area, it just sets things on fire with a fire dot. So this damage isn't based on the HP of the minion itself. It's just like a flat number that scales with the levels of the support gem. And then it makes the minion take, 40% max life per second as fire damage that you have to mitigate with fire res and offset with some life regen, so your minion doesn't kill itself. Alright, so what makes Infernal Legion so good on AG? Obviously in this case it's mainly for the Marionette's bonus, but in general I do think he is a pretty solid guy to put Infernal Legion on. Infernal Legion, you can put it on a couple different options, right? Like I saw Nito recently made a Holy Strike Infernal Legion build, which looked pretty solid. I like to go with the AG just because of two things. The first is that it has a pretty good built-in more damage multiplier. Again, that doesn't specify more damage with attacks or anything, so it applies to the Infernal Legion itself. That's also why we're using AG of Smiting instead of base AG. Because AG of Smiting gets about twice as much of that more damage multiplier. So currently it's about 80% at level 21. The other reason is that obviously you can put gear on the AG. So the gear that you put on him also scales the Infernal Legion damage. Specifically stuff like Fire Dot Multi is very difficult to get on minions normally. So being able to get good sources of that onto the AG through stuff like his weapon or his gloves is very, very important. Infernal Legion, a lot of these sort of support gem enabled playstyles suffer from the same issue. They're very hard to get the base damage high enough without resorting to like crazy levels. So that's why I'll often see people using either like the level 30 helmets. I'm talking about things like Infernal Legion or Impending Doom. Or you'll see people using Forbidden Shaco, right? So I was using the level 30 Infernal Legion helmet, Formless Inferno. This comes from Breach. Until about 2 days ago, then one of these, live searches popped for a Forbidden Shaco. The multi-strike on there doesn't really do anything one way or the other, but the level 34 Infernal Legion was a pretty substantial damage upgrade over the level 31. So yeah, I mean, that's mainly the build, right? Like, we use animate weapons just to buff AG. We give the AG items. We scale his AoE, we scale his fire dot multi. We give him explosions. That's another big benefit of using AG compared to something like Holy Strike, is that you can put Legacy of Fury on him, the Maven boots. You can put Explode on the chest or from a Cane of Kulamak like I've done. And you can basically give him, Infernal Legion itself has pretty weak coverage, especially because you're beholden to sort of minion AI, right? Like, I've given him a lot of movement speed, but he still sort of gets stuck attacking mobs or just decides to take a break, on the job. So stuff like automation convocation is very important for sort of letting him stick to targets. But more than that is sort of getting a way to spread the relatively small Infernal Legion AoE into more enemies. And the best way to do that is with explosions. So the sort of interesting thing about AG is that the links that you have on him can apply to those explosions, right? Like his global damage from the support gem, stuff like Swift Affliction, stuff like minion damage and efficacy, if I'm doing Legacy of Fury, all of these support gems, as far as I'm aware, should be applying to that damage also, as well as obviously the big chunk of increased damage that Marionettes is giving him with all these animate weapons up. So I mean, let's pull up the POB for a second here. So you can see, like, with the reservation DPS from the Puppeteer reservation node, it's sitting about 20 million dot damage, which is, you know, not too shabby in the current state of the game. So yeah, damage links for the AG, just dot stuff, minion damage, swift affliction, efficacy, and then I got imbued burning damage. This was sort of like a bricked outcome for the people playing hit-based AG of smiting, so I was able to get that for cheap. You could flip these around too a little bit, obviously, right? Like imbue efficacy, get burning damage in the links, whatever. If you are using Legacy of Fury, you don't want to click LE Focus, just because then you'll no longer be able to scorch the enemies and proc the Legacy of Fury effect. So yeah, don't get baited by this, even though it is technically the best imbue in terms of raw damage percent. Other than that, I mean, the build is mainly just juicing, taking the relatively low Infernal Legion base damage and just multiplying it out the wazoo, right? So we have, in the POB, I haven't clicked this because it doesn't count the numbers properly, but you can see over here, with 27 animate weapons, 27 ranged animate weapons, and 11 vol animate weapons, this node is giving a whopping 1,625% ink damage. So I've just manually gotten out of that because POB doesn't have support for congregation quite yet. And obviously unclick the node if you're doing it manually. In POB, don't unclick this in game. Other than that, there's some small things, like because the AG is constantly degenning, I do have to do things like give him max res. So we come over here and we click things like minions have 8% to all max res. On my shield, I have 5% to all max res. And then I'm clicking minion life regen. So here on these small nodes are actually 1.5% each. So between these three nodes and this node over here with 88% max regen, he's just able to out regen the degen that the Infernal Legion is putting on him. And then beyond that, there's some other small tech that I fit in eventually for keeping him alive. So you'll see here I've clicked Minion Defense Mastery for minions recover 5% life on minion death. This is actually because whenever you overwrite an existing animate weapon, it counts as one dying, right? So if I'm already at my max 27 animate weapons, if I then unleash and I summon 10 more, each of those counts as one dying. So all of my minions heal for 50% HP instantly. And I can just keep spamming that. So even in some sketchy encounters, like my AG doesn't have the most, life that you'll ever see on one. The energy shield also doesn't actually do anything. He gains that from marination here. But obviously, because he's constantly degenning and has no ES regen, that is always at 0, right? So even though he only has like 18k life at the moment, he's only died like once or twice in some super sketchy encounters. And that's mainly thanks to just being able to on-demand heal everybody for 50% whenever I want, just by spamming my animate weapons. Other than that, in the POB on weapon, the main important stat here is just the minion AoE, and then trigger for some utility. I'm just casting my curses that way. Is good. Victario's Influence, this is kind of a good like budget option. I think eventually I would replace this just with a crafted like big ES chest. Especially now if you can get your hands on this Forbidden Shaco, you actually, with better gloves and boots, I could click this Armor ES Mastery here. So 100% increased armor and ES. If your helmet, gloves, and boots all have armor and ES on them. You would not be able to click that if you were still using Formless Inferno, unfortunately. So yeah, for now I'm sort of a life hybrid. I have Replica Soul Tether, just for the Doriani Timeless Jewel effect. So I have about 5k HP and 2.5k ES. and the damage is split between those evenly. And then for defenses, it's just sort of nearly capped block and spell block. And yeah, I mean, Flesh and Stone, I guess. So not the tankiest character. Not the most damage either, but I think the playstyle is pretty fun, and it's sort of an interesting way to build a character to get damage out of it, right? Yeah, I'm not going to go too much into the min-maxing of this. Like I said, I was only able to play this for about a week. I'm about to leave, and the event's going to end before I come back, so it is what it is. Just quickly, the AG items. This is a Cane of Kulamak, just with Fire Multi and Chaos Explode. Ideally, I would like this with fire damage prefixed too, but none have popped up while I've been looking that I could afford at least. So, the helmet, I crafted this. It's basically just to give him a little bit extra regen, some chaos res, and fill out his AoE. And then while a unique enemy is in your presence modifier actually applies, it counts the player. So this is up all the time as long as you're near your AG. So you can actually do this with the while a Pinnacle Atlas boss is in your presence. Searing Exarch or Eater implicits as well. People use this back in Mercenary League, but it works the same with an AG and the player. Body armor. This was just like a starter item I put on him, but honestly, I just never got around to upgrading out of it. Carcass Jack, just ink AoE, some area damage. Probably you would recraft this into an explodey chest with, elevated explode and maybe the endurance charge when hit and AoE per endurance charge modifiers. Lose some AoE there, but gain some explosions. The gloves, these are just like one mod shaper gloves basically with crafted ink AoE, just for Fire Multi. You could also obviously do Eldritch implicit gloves with Fire Multi instead. If you had the Explodia chest, maybe you'd go like Fire Convert on there and get the Ignite chance from your Cane of Kulamak, and maybe he would start igniting stuff with the Explodes too. I don't know. And then last, but certainly not least, is Legacy of Fury. The Scorch is very nice, but the thing that sort of made the build pop off, in my opinion, was the Legacy of Fury sort of pseudo-explode effect. That sort of took the build from feeling, okay, to being like really solid in terms of clear. So yeah, that's sort of the gist of the character. I'm not going to go into like all the details about what I did in the POB. I'll leave a link in the description. You can probably figure out most of the things from there. If you have any questions about specifics or how I've built it, feel free to leave them as a comment. Like I said, I'm about to leave, so I'm not going to be able to take this character any further, but it's been a ton of fun playing it so far. And I would say that if you're kind of bored in the event and you want another character to play, this is certainly an interesting one, right? It's kind of rare that you get the chance to actually use Infernal Legion to do this much damage and with this many explodes, right? So, yeah, thanks for watching. See you guys.